It's 2022, Ace Nation. If you have to see a rental property to purchase it, you're behind the curve. Because there's a lot of competition out there that doesn't need to see this property, right? There's a lot of sight unseen offers. There's a lot of folks doing this out of state. There's a lot of folks doing this locally without making a visit. I almost bought my personal home that I live in now damn near sight unseen. I did a 5-minute walkthrough through the open house, made the offer, got an inspection report in hand, had my realtor take a look at it, and was done. That was it, right? So you need to be equipped with these same tools that the rest of the field has, or with better tools than the rest of the field has, so that you can be more competitive and you're not limited in the types of properties that you are able to purchase or hoping to purchase, right? And how are you limited? By visually having to go to the property and check it out. You're limited in two ways. One, by process, two, by product, right? So you're process limited because you actually have to get in your car, drive to this thing, schedule a meeting, right? Drive to this thing, take a walk through, look at all this stuff that probably is not going to affect your decision as much as you think it is, because it really comes down to the numbers, because it's an investment and numbers can be had remotely. And then you got to drive on back, talk to your broker, make the offer, or talk to the listing agent, the seller, make the offer, and it'll probably just get turned down, or you won't make an offer at all, right? So you're going to see so much stuff that you're never even going to make an offer on, and you're going to invest 1 to 2 to 3 hours just looking at opportunities that you're never going to intend to even purchase or move through your pipeline. So you're process limited because it takes a lot of time. That's with a local property. With an out-of-state property, you got to actually fly out and go see this thing, get a hotel, make a whole weekend of it, right? Or a week of it, whatever it might be. And those are both really inefficient procedures. They don't allow you to evaluate as many properties as you could. Therefore, you're not going to be able to get more good opportunities through your pipeline. Your pipeline's clogged up by bad opportunities that you're spending a lot of time with. That's the process limitation. You're product limited in that you're only able to buy properties that you can, or evaluate and make offers on properties that you can actually visit in time. And that means a bunch of different properties in a bunch of different states that you can't make it out to don't get to make it in your funnel. You're limited in the product that you get to select. And your investment strategy doesn't get to adjust as easily with the market, right? We can shift very easily with the market because we have multiple states to kind of toggle between, crank up our efforts in one versus the other. Like right now, we're targeting markets where prices have been pretty flat, but rent growth's been really strong, and we're finding really good spread in that. We were able to make that change within about 1 or 2 weeks. We just tell our sales team, hey, get into your pipelines, use these filters, create these views, and attack this type of product instead, right? So product limits you when you have to see the property in person. You can't be as agile to change your investment strategy or to add different modules to your portfolio. So how do we fix that? So we built a system a long time ago. It's kind of crazy. When we started, this wasn't a business. We were just going to buy rental properties in 2016 out of state. And everyone told us we were crazy for buying out of state in the first place. We didn't tell them we didn't plan to see these properties. We thought we were still going to go see them. Took a flight out, looked at some properties, didn't buy a single one, realized it was a giant waste of time. Why? Because these properties are so damn cheap that it wasn't worth even like a drive to visit them, right? We just want to be able to make snap decisions. And at first, my business partner didn't even agree with me on this whole sight unseen thing. He's like, we need boots on the ground and someone to go take video, and then we can watch the video, and then we can have them go and negotiate with the person for us, and we cut them in on the deal, and it was too much. And I'm like, no, dude, I know this is a little weird, but we've got to be able to make these decisions off of verbally collected information and then verify after we already have a deal. We have to push the high effort to a very late part in the process so that we can make sure our conversion rate on the front end is guaranteed before we put that effort in. And that became a business. That system was just for us to buy a rental property, and eventually became a business that we were able to market to, well, you guys, right? First, it was a services business, and this is our primary, which flips investment properties out of state to investors, usually in California and other big cities right across the country, that want to be able to buy them sight unseen but don't have the system. And we lend them our system along with the product that's built into it, so we kind of integrate the product into the system and offer it to them. Then we wanted to market that system because, well, it was something that people needed, but they didn't know where to find it. So we started marketing through social media, and we started sharing this system with you guys through content. And eventually we built tools and digital products that we sell as well that offer you pieces of that system that are kind of modified to be consumer friendly, which you see like in the course that we put out, the new deal analysis program that I'm going to be releasing, the cheap tools that we have there. These are all pieces of our, hey, how do you buy a property without seeing it system that's become, well, marketable to you guys, practical outside of like this commercial high volume case use, right? Which is our use. We're doing this like 3 properties a week. We bought 6 properties this week, I think, right? Not 3. And there were some 4plexes in the mix too. But for you guys to be able to do it 1 or 2 or 3 times a year, we've modified it and offered to you as well. So that's what I'm going to give you guys today. I'm going to give you a free version of that system that a lot of you have already paid for, because I feel bad like withholding information. I still want to teach you guys. And for the ones that are on the fence, you'll be able to learn today exactly what you need to buy a property without seeing it and own a rental property without ever seeing it. Hopefully we'll change your mindset a little bit for the folks that aren't on the fence, that are just new to this concept. So you get to learn something about, hey, this isn't as hard as you think it is. And for the folks that have already, well, that'll never buy the programs and digital products and whatever, I don't care. I still want to teach you something. Why the hell not? So today we'll jump on and we'll give you 5 things that you need in order, 5 pieces of your key plan in a very particular order that'll allow you to go from not owning any rental property, not knowing how to do this out of state, to being able to actually close your first deal. Right? And maybe this live might be enough to do it if you really are good at filling in the gaps, right? Because I'm only going to talk to you about this stuff for like 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a really brief overview. It's going to be a mini version of this course, right? But first we're going to do a giveaway. The code today, appropriately so, is Sight Unseen. And that's SIGHTUNSEEN. It's one word. It's all lowercase. Where are you going to use that coupon code? Well, a lot of you already know, if you're on this live, exactly what to do for the giveaways. But if you don't, after this live's over, I'm going to post it. I'm going to post it to a story. The story following that one is going to be an announcement that the coupon code is active. It'll give you a link to be able to go to the spreadsheet store or the Selfie store, where we have our tools, right? The rental property calculator and friends. And you'll see a coupon code slot appear, if it is still available, prior to hitting that checkout button. It'll be right above that checkout button. If that slot isn't there, you're either too early, you're trying to get your hands on one before everyone else gets to see it, or you're too late. All 25 of the freebies are gone. It's 25 every Friday, 25 every Monday. They go fast. So you gotta have story notifications on, and you gotta be ready to jump to get your $40 freebie. Or you can just pay $40 if you really need something, unless you're trying to just play around and just get the freebie for fun. Fine, go for it. But guys, if you've been needing to crunch numbers on rental properties, I really hope that you're not doing this giveaway thing every Friday and competing with like 2,000 other people who are here on this live every Friday for the first 1 minute window where you can get one of 25 freebies. But maybe you are, which is fine with me. But yeah, guys, it's $40. Like it's not worth your time. Just buy it. So the coupon code Sight Unseen, all lowercase. I'm not going to mention it again in this session. Hey, it does not include the course. You're not going to get a free version of the course. It's a $500 product. And like I'd say at least once a week, I get a person going, hey, Elliot, is there any way I can get a discount on the course? And I shamelessly go, absolutely not, because there's no reason I should be selling this for $500. I priced this thing at $500 so that I never have to discount it for you guys, because it is a freaking insane deal. And you'll see today that it is really like an expansion of like this summary of our business model that I'm going to share with you, right? Like it's literally a live demo with, like screen share showing you how to utilize these processes. It's not just me over like an Excel slide, right? 8.5 hour handheld version of this live session, which is really a version of our internal business process that it's like 20 million in sales per year, right? So yeah, it's not going to be discounted. It's $500. Spend it if you need it. It'll be worth it. Let's get on with today's session. I'm not going to pitch anymore. So we're going to talk the 5 key steps to your plan to be able to purchase a rental property without ever seeing it. I don't care if it's in state or out of state. You should be using a process, something like this, to be more efficient. Number 1, you need a criteria. This is the first kind of key milestone before you can move forward and start pursuing deals. And a lot of people skip this milestone. Because, I don't know, maybe they're not organized or process oriented. They just start looking at properties for sale in a bunch of different places, right? Or they go straight to trying to pick a market. But the thing is, if you don't have a criteria, you don't actually know what you're searching for. So you have a very hard time making decisions. And when you have a hard time making decisions, then you are unable to proceed confidently. Step 1, step 2, step 3. You end up kind of in limbo and spinning around in circles, which is where people get stuck before their first deal. So a lot of you who are stuck, unable to do your first deal because you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing, you might want to go back and establish your criteria. Here's what your criteria should consist of. Number 1 is you need to decide what asset you're going after. Is it residential? Is it multifamily, single family? Is it commercial, mixed use? Are you going after, hotel, gas station, warehouse, office, right? You have to decide what type of asset, what type of product you're going after. You have to set a criteria for yield. What's the minimum cap rate you need at market value, not at your discounted price, but at market value for this product to make sense for you? What is the asset class? A, B, C neighborhood? What are you doing with that, right? All of them work. All of them have different strategies. They have implications as well. You need to decide what size and price range you're capable of purchasing in or that you want to purchase in, so number of units or total dollars. And then the execution. You need to decide what kind of execution you plan on pursuing or execution model you plan on pursuing. What do I mean by that? Are you going to be just hey, I'm going to buy this thing at market value, passively invest, and just be a landlord? Am I going to be a flipper? Am I going to wholesale? Am I going to do bird deals? So I'm looking for value add. Like, what's the actual work that I'm going to do when it comes to buying, potentially stabilizing, and then either holding or exiting this property, right? Because your execution strategy is going to dictate which product fits your criteria or not, right? So that's criteria. Once you have your criteria plan set, you need to decide on a market. How do you decide on a market? Here's my cheat sheet. Personally, for me, I like cash flowing assets. So I go Midwest and South, secondary and select tertiary markets, landlord friendly states, about an hour outside of major cities where I end up being. And I like a cap rate at market value and market rents of 7 or above. Market value and market rents. Remember, I always decide my cap rate based on market value and market rents because you need a baseline, right? You can't have variables in there. So that's my controlled variable. I could buy it at a discount after that, right? But cap rate at market value and market rents of 7 and above. So that gives you an idea of what you need to decide, right? So when you're picking a market, the first thing you want to look for, if you're not just trying to use my cheat sheet and you're trying to, which you shouldn't, right? You should just pick your own market. You need to look for a market that has an abundance of a product that meets your criteria. So you know what your product is. You set your criteria first. Then you need to pick a market that has a lot of it because it's going to be really hard to find that deal, that needle in a haystack, when you are in a city that only has a few fourplexes, but you're looking for fourplexes. You want to go to a city that has a ton of fourplexes because then it'll increase your opportunities of getting a deal at some point reasonably soon, right? So abundance is first. Then you're going to look for a market that meets your financial criteria. Do properties actually meet that cap rate at market value that have sold recently? You want to look for laws. Is it landlord friendly enough? Does it meet your criteria when it comes to the tenant dynamics? Competition. This is really important. The product that you want, is it a highly sought after product in your market? Because if it's too sought after and it's been very sought after for some extended period of time, it's well known, then you're going to come up against a lot of competition, meaning your chances of getting a good deal are lower. You see how everything's stacked towards getting like the best possible deal? We call this engineering spread, right? Or engineering a discount. Trajectory of the market. Is there something happening? Get in and talk to investors, talk to property managers, check out the news stories, look at the rent trends. Is there something happening that gives you a reason to believe you will experience rent growth? Because the success of your asset, whether you're buying a high cap rate or a low cap rate asset today, the success of your asset relies on something good happening to rents for the landlord, obviously, right? Rents going up and a thesis for rents to continue to go up at some reasonable rate at or greater than the rate of inflation over the period of time that you plan to hold the asset. So look for the trajectory. And does that market contain the resources that you need? What do I mean? Are there enough lenders? Are there enough inspectors? Are there enough property management companies for you to be successful out there? Do not pick a market that only has one property manager that has a good enough amount of Google reviews and well-rated at a glance. You want to pick markets that have redundance of these human resources, right? And these corporate resources that you need, these operational resources that you need, so you don't get stuck with a property because one property manager failed you, or because you got a bank that decided they don't want to lend, they don't have an appetite for your product anymore. You need redundance of resources. So that's your market selection plan. Then you got to come up with a plan to fund it. Number 3, right? So what types of funding do you need? The decision is yours. It's going to be either cash or cash equivalent, right? If you're big ballin'. It's going to be conventional financing if you're looking for residential 1 to 4 and you want to use fixed rate loans and your W-2 and all that. It's going to be commercial financing, which I strongly recommend for people that really want to get into this real estate game. Establish those relationships early on. You'll learn a lot about how lending works, and you're not as limited in your choices of product, but they might look at your docs a little more closely and they'll look at the property more closely, so they're going to be picky. Commercial financing is my favorite, so local banks, big banks that offer commercial product. Or is it going to be private lending? So private lending is hey, they don't want to look at your income, they'll just look at the property's income, the DSCR loan. It's the hard money lender for that bird deal that you found a good price on. It's the private lender that's going to give you a long-term rental loan and isn't as picky about the product itself, right? Or where you live or whatever it might be. So private lending is all that I don't qualify for the conventional stuff type of resource. And I'd say be very careful with that. I'm not a big fan. I've never used a private loan. I've always done it either through cash or just qualified and got it commercially. But I understand some of you guys want to get into the game. And I'd say mind your eagerness to get into rentals if you can't afford them or can't afford the debt. And if you are going to use these alternative lending sources or even partner money, right? Taking on a partner, borrowing from a friend, borrowing from a private lender, hard money lender, getting a DSCR loan because you don't qualify on your regular income. These are all more expensive options, and they're riskier options as a result, right? So the deal has to be really good. Make sure that if you're going to use these options, you set your criteria on the deal to compensate for the additional cost and risk associated with these non-conforming financing options, right? Which means you have to work a little bit harder to find the right deal. You have to be better at this business, which might be worthwhile for you. So yeah, it could be a good thing, but don't go buying average deals with above average loan pricing. That's not gonna win. That's not a winning strategy. That's not something that's gonna get you rich. So the type of lender, once you choose that type of lender, you wanna go in before you call a single one, you wanna build a list of all of them. Get a spreadsheet going, or a CRM if you have one, but get a spreadsheet going and make a list of every single local bank in this area, in the areas that you've selected, in the markets you've selected. Every single private lender that services the states that you've selected. Whatever it might be, compile. Make it long. Go as exhaustive as you can. Spend a couple hours doing this, because you're going to want to call on them all at once, but not yet. You're going to want to hit all your qualifications first. So make sure everything that they might need to see from you to make a decision on you, you have in a single place before you make a single phone call to a lender, because these folks are busy and they love saying no to tire kickers, right? So what you want to have is your financial statement dialed in, a balance sheet dialed in, a schedule of all the assets and liabilities dialed in, income and expenses, your tax returns. All of this stuff needs to be in a single place, packaged up, so when you do make that first point of contact, you go, hey, I'm Elliot. I want a loan on this kind of property in this area, and I'm sending my financials to your inbox right now. You already have them. They're all packed into one place. I should be well qualified for this, 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 and this. Do I fit in the box? That's it. So have all of your qualifications together. Then you're going to go hit that list that you made and do your outreach. All right, so that's your financing plan. This is all the preparation. Now you can get into the biz of finding properties, right? So the acquisitions plan is the biggest part here. This is where all the work really happens, and this is where the majority of the course, like this is the longest module in the course. And I can't get very far into acquisitions in this live session, but it's really 4 steps, guys. One is lead gen. Are you going MLS? Are you having realtors bring you deals off market? Are you getting commercial brokers to bring you deals off market, or wholesalers bringing you deals? Or are you going to be marketing directly to sellers, sending letters, calling, voicemails, texts, all that other stuff? What's your plan for lead gen to get properties in front of you? There's no point in going out and trying to buy properties without a lead gen plan. You need the plan to get these opportunities consistently flowing onto your desk before you actually worry about, well, how am I going to decide what to offer? Right? You want to be too busy with opportunities hitting your desk. Number 2. So number 1 is lead gen. That's the first part of the acquisitions plan. Second part is qualification. How do you go through and make decisions quickly on these properties? Usually I make decisions early on based on the income, expenses, and the asking price. Financials first. Does it meet that cap rate criteria that you set in the very beginning? That's where most deals tend to burn. So I'm asking those questions very early on. I'm not talking about condition at all. I'm not seeing the property because condition doesn't usually kill the deal if the numbers do work. But numbers kill the deal very often, regardless of condition. So I'm going numbers first, then tenants, then a deep discussion on condition afterwards so I can make an adjustment to my price and make a proper offer. So lead gen qualification, then you're entering this valuation and offer. You need to know how to value this property. So how do you value a property? 2 approaches. This is a dense live session, guys. 2 approaches to valuing a property. I hope you're going to rewatch this over the weekend, hit pause, write all this stuff down. The 2 approaches to valuing a property are the comparable sales approach and the income approach. Does your property have a higher or lower cap rate than other properties that have sold nearby? And is your property selling at a higher or lower price per unit, price per square foot than other comparable properties that have sold nearby? That's your valuation approach. And then you're making an offer based on what you think your property is really worth. Now, you might discount that price to some degree because you need some equity in the deal, right? But your offer is based on really a baseline that you set. Hey, the property is truly worth X, and I need to buy it at 0.8x, 0.9x. But you need to figure out what that X is, and that's why that valuation piece comes into play and why it's so important. And then once you make that offer and it's accepted, I need some coffee to wet the palate. Once you make that offer and it's accepted, you need to perform due diligence once you're in contract. So that's the last step of the acquisitions plan, is due diligence. What is that? It's getting an inspection. Hire a third-party inspection company. Get one that does those 3D walkthroughs. Make sure they take a bunch of extra pictures if they don't. Ask for some video content if they don't. Have them send it all over to you. Call them. Talk to them about all the stuff that pops up on that inspection report. It's really important when you're not there that the inspection report is more than just a marginal and defective summary. That's a key part of your due diligence. Then you're going to collect seller financials, so rent roll, operating statements, or profit and loss statements if you need them. And then the most important thing, sign leases to verify the rents, right? Or estoppel letters if leases don't exist because it was like a month-to-month handshake thing, a long-term tenant thing. Send them an estoppel letter, have them have their tenants sign so they can certify the current pricing and terms of their occupancy for you when you take over. That's your acquisitions plan. And then the last bit, we're going to wrap this up with management. So as you're in escrow on a property, so before you actually selected a property, while you were actually picking markets, you made sure there were enough viable managers, just management companies with a good number of good reviews available in the marketplace. If there are, you're not interviewing them that early. Interview them during escrow. Show up to their desk with a property. Not literally show up, but like call them with a property in hand. I'm in escrow on this deal. I want to talk to you about managing it. So you want to compile a list first, just like with the lenders, and just go for people that have like a 4-star and above Google review and a lot of reviews. And make a list of like top 5. And then call on all of them. The interview process is complete bullshit because they all know how to answer your questions. But here's what you want to look for. Someone that does full service maintenance. And you want an idea of what a unit turn tends to cost and what like roofs and furnaces and windows tend to cost. Just the basic stuff, right? What are some recent scopes of work and quotes that you've given for this kind of work? You want to make sure they have the ability to get that work done. So you want to know how much time it tends to take for a unit turn when a tenant vacates. They are using a online portal that you, the owner, has access to so you can monitor the income and expenses. And that's about it. Other than that, the management company is purely going to be on quality, and you're not going to be able to decide that based on an interview phone call. You just want to make sure they offer the resources that you need to be able to successfully oversee them from afar, and so that they can basically turn units and refill them and fix your property as needed, right? And then the oversight piece of the management's easy. At the end of each month, when the statement comes in, usually at the beginning of the month, for the previous month, I fully underwrite all the income and expenses of the prior. And I make sure I understand every item and when it came in. It's got to make sense, right? So underwrite your management statements. Don't get lazy about that stuff. Don't be too nitpicky and ask a bunch of questions. You're going to hate your guts if you do, but that's going to be the key to making sure that you're not getting stuck on the back burner with your property. And if your management company is consistently not performing, and I don't mean over little stuff, I mean by a large margin, then you probably want to make that switch sooner than later, but be careful doing it too hastily because You don't want to constantly switch management. It's a bad look for your tenants, and it puts you in a bad place because you burn through a couple of the good ones because you're too hasty to jump from one to the next, and you're probably not going to go back to them. So now you're stuck with what you got left. So be careful to have the right expectations of your management company and draw that line when it comes to pulling the trigger on a switch. So that is the 5-step how to buy a rental property out of state, in state, whatever, that you've never seen, and how to own it sight unseen business plan, right? That's basically our model taken and consumerized for you. The 5 things you need in order. And no, dense live session, right? A lot of information, probably the most information I've put in a 30-minute session in a long time. But the 5 things in order: number 1, you need to have your criteria in place. Number 2, you need to know how to select a market, and you need to select a market. Number 3, you need a financing plan. How do you want to fund these properties? And then you need to go out and have that financing plan established so that you can fund upon closing. Number 4 is you need to build your acquisitions plan, right? Lead gen, qualification, how to value and make an offer, and then how to do due diligence. Due diligence. That's a tongue twister. And then number 5 is your management plan. Getting a manager, interviewing them, overseeing them while you own the property. And that's it, right? That's how you buy a rental property sight unseen. Let's do some Q&A, folks. I'm toast. That was like machine gun information. I already got some questions coming in, so let's answer them. Would you get a lender that's in the same state you are purchasing? So lenders tend to be picky about footprint, especially banks. If they're a bank, they are usually going to want the borrower and the property to be in the same state that they have a geographic footprint in. But some of them will flex on the borrower thing. Not many of them will flex on the property thing, right? So if you're in California, like I am, and you're trying to go to local banks here in California, tell them to lend to you on properties in Kentucky, it's gonna be really tough, unless they actually have branches in Kentucky. But you can call a bunch of banks in Kentucky and say, I'm in California, I got a property out there. Most of them will say, we don't like the out-of-state buyer thing, because banks are so blue-blooded and old school. But you will find a couple here and there that will say, you know what, fine. You just got to find out who those banks are, which is why you have to form a list and you have to call out a bunch of them. Favorite city to get a fourplex? I don't have favorites, guys. So you guys always ask me, what's the best city to buy this type of property in? I go, wherever you find a good deal. Wherever you find a good deal. Like, I don't have easy answers for you, because that's just not how it works, right? Like, I would give you easy answers if they existed. And when they do exist, I give you the easy answers. They don't exist. That's not how it works. You just got to operate in markets where you know you can execute well. And it's more important to be able to find a deal at a slight discount from market value, or that just like will perform well, even if it's not at a discount, right? That will perform well, than trying to find the perfect market to invest in. It's like someone asking you, what's the best stock to buy right now, right? And really it's, do you have an asset class, like on the stock market, that you understand well and that you can operate between like different stocks within this space well? Or do you have an investment strategy that you have like the right kind of frame of mind for, that you have the discipline to be able to execute properly, right? It's never about just picking that one magical right thing. It's kind of sensationalized. It's usually not the case. Best place to find rent stats or compare recent sales or export that data. Look, statistics in the real estate world are garbage. So we are subscribed to CoStar, not for long, we canceled. Their data they say their data is amazing, it's trash. It's complete trash. And they're the gold standard. Their data is complete trash. So beyond them, what do you have? You have actual listings and actual sales. And you can look on Zillow, you can use PropStream, you can look on the county record sites, you can have a realtor print out results from the MLS or pull results from the MLS. You're gonna have to look at, I've simplified, and it sounds kind of crazy that this is how I pull rent comps, but I literally go on like Zillow and I see what's for rent in the area, and I go, can I adjust upwards or downwards based on how my product that I'm researching compares to this product? I just leave it at that. And if I really need help, I call property managers and go, what's the best you can get? And sometimes they're really conservative. Sometimes they're too liberal and they give you really high numbers. So you almost have to like know your managers. And the margin of safety you build into the deal is what allows you to like absorb that uncertainty early on a property where you can't get a clear answer. right? And that's the reality there, is you have to build some margin of safety into the deal so you can absorb that uncertainty until you really, really know that market and product. Whenever we get into a new market, we always need to get really, really lucky deals for us to buy confidently and then sell to our investors confidently, right? Because we can't tell them with certainty, this is the rent you're going to get, you're going to succeed with this manager, this is the kind of project they could take on, and this is what your property is worth. But over time, we start to be able to take on more deals that don't have as big of spreads in them, as big of a margin of safety in them, because we know the market really well. And I think that's the most important takeaway for you here. Let's get some more questions going. Why don't I hire people to do my own property management? You mean like hire W-2 staff and have them manage my properties for me rather than hire 1099 property management companies? We're not big enough for me to want to bother building that. And also that's a very unprofitable business. So if I can just hand it off to someone that's got a system in place, I'm not worried about the cost difference between 8% and 5%. And I'm not that worried about the performance difference either between I don't know if my property is performing at a 10 cap or an 11 cap, because my properties are small enough to sell them on pro forma and not actuals. That's how the market values them. They actually values them based on sales comps truly, right? So the income is only supplemental to the valuation process. And I'm a deal hunter, right? So I make my money upon entry. I've kind of mastered, I'm not gonna say kind of, we have mastered the process of purchasing properties that are worth less than $1 million at a substantial discount from what they're worth in their as-is condition. That's how we make our money. We don't make our money on squeezing a couple bucks more out of rents. So I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about doing what we do really well, even better, which there's a lot of meat on the bone to do. And that's why I don't care about hiring a bunch of people in Indiana to come work for ACE all the way over in Indiana, have to manage them, deal with that operational burden just to squeeze a couple more bucks out of the property. That's just not my niche. That's not where the money's made. And we're making money, we're doing well, so we're just gonna stick to what we do well. Focus is really important. Can I tell us about the 14 cap we just sold? Yeah, it was an interesting property. So it was a 13 cap. It was a commercial building, but we had a permitted use for multifamily from the city. The seller provided it to us. We got it directly from the city also to confirm that. And the tenant in it, so they converted it to residential units, even though it looked a little commercial still, one of the units. They were converted to residential units at some point. And then the tenant was a staffing company that does light industrial staffing, basically blue collar workers. And apparently they have programs that bring immigrants in working on visas through them as temps basically. And they help them I don't know if they're just working here, if they help them naturalize, but they place them in these units. So our tenants, not ours, but our client who bought it now, right? That property's tenant is actually a rather large staffing company that's in 14 states, and they've been with that building for 5 years, and they just place residents on a 2 to 3 year basis, and they're willing to pay a premium in exchange for having control over that full building. So yeah, it's a really good situation for our buyer. And we priced it at a 13 cap, which we normally wouldn't do because of the non-conforming nature of the building and of the tenant. And we called that a big bonus to the buyer. We said, hey, if you put residential tenants in these, we're getting quoted. This thing is still a 13 cap, but worst case, maybe it's a 9, and that's what we would normally price something like that at. So they got this pretty cool bonus cash flow on a property, priced it where we'd normally price it if you didn't have that bonus cash flow. So yeah, lucky deal. We had 50 something cash offers on that property overnight at our asking price, which is kind of typical. We get 30 to 40 cash offers overnight at our asking. We put out 2 really nice duplexes next to a hospital last night. I won't tell you in which city, but right next to a hospital, there was a grad student living in one. You could definitely get medical residents and medical professionals as residents in this building, 1,200 market rents each. And we put them out at 8 cap at currents, 9.5 at market, because the rents were so pushed up because of the proximity to that hospital and the good location. But yeah, we put those out yesterday at 185 a pop, and we got this morning at 7 a.m. we had 33 cash offers, with multiple of them on both buildings. So yeah, pretty cool. Demand gen engine. Thanks for joining these lives. You're pumping the algo and you're making sure investors are coming to our list. And we're selling them good properties with a good service attached to it. So I think that's part of it too. Can you buy a property through an LLC in another state if you're out of a bank's footprint? So the bank doesn't give a shit where the LLC is located. They care where the borrower is located, because an LLC is a pass-through entity anyways, right? So it really just all flows through to you. It's just to limit your liability. And the bank is going to make you, commercial lenders make you sign a personal guarantee anyways, right? So like there's recourse on these loans. A personal guarantee means you are on the hook. It's a commercial guarantee signed by you, the individual, and by the LLC. So there's like two papers in that set of mortgage docs when you sign, or two different commercial guarantees in that set of mortgage docs where you sign. So there's like personal collateralization, therefore they care where you are located. And I think the reason they care where you're located is not because of like, hey, they can't collect, like they could still pursue you as creditors regardless of what state you're in as long as you're within the country, right? It's very easy for them. They want to make sure, banks are very old school, so they want to make sure they have the ability to form a relationship with you, which is completely ass backwards, right? But they want to form a relationship with their borrower, and they think that means walking into the branch, hey, how you doing, Elliot? Which, I walk into this Wells Fargo down the street from us now, and they go, hey, how you doing, Elliot? Oh, man, nice to see you. Can we get you a cup of coffee, all this stuff? And it's like, great, dude. Like, you guys are holding a bunch of cash for me. That's lovely, but, like, the service is a total commodity, right? I don't care if you're going to offer me online wires for a couple bucks a month. Like, that's what they're selling. In their head, they want access to that client. It's really silly. I think it's going to change in, like, the next decade, too, because the advent of, like, remote investing is very much here. You just got to remember that these banks' primary product is not loans on rental properties, right? So in our head as rental property investors, it makes no sense for this bank to have geographic restrictions on the borrower at all. But from the bank's perspective, they're not interested in giving loans to rental property investors. That's a very small part of their portfolio, which is why they still have these restrictions in place, because their primary customer is probably the local business getting loans for capital purchases, right? So that's a little bit of a look into the banking world. As you can tell, I spend a lot of time talking to commercial lenders and learning their business, kind of seeing. I have one guy that always says, let me tell you how the sausage is made. I'm like, I don't need to know how the sausage is made, dude. But seeing what's going on under the hood of these banks kind of helps us understand why they make it difficult for us rental property investors, because we're a small portion of their portfolio. I'll take one more good question. What do we have? Would I recommend private loans versus traditional loans? If no, why not? I don't recommend private loans. I mean, like, I don't like private loans. I don't like private loans because that flexibility comes at a premium, and I don't need that flexibility. But for someone that really needs that flexibility, then I would say, hey, they're obviously offering you something that is going to allow you to purchase property, whereas the traditional lender literally might be like prohibitive of you purchasing property because of their requirements. They don't have that flexibility on your income, the property's income, the appraisal, whatever it might be, right? The amount of capital that you have. They don't give you that flexibility, so you might not be able to get a deal, but you really have to ask yourself when using a private lender. And I've had clients come to me all the time. They go, I want to buy this property. It's a 7 cap from you so bad, but I can't qualify for a loan. Let me use this private lender that's going to charge me a 6.5% interest rate. And I go, how much money do you think you're going to make on this property to really make that 6.5 interest rate worthwhile? Like, is this property really worth you chasing after some private lender? And I think there's this mindset of like owning real estate, you just have to do it because that's just what's going to make you rich. And it forces people into pursuing like by any means funding strategies, but these by any means funding strategies completely like diminish the actual purpose of purchasing the deal, right? Unless the property is just going to appreciate so much and the rents are going to grow so much. And you've got to ask yourself, hey, can I actually cover this more expensive debt if this property doesn't do what I hope it does under best case circumstances? And the answer for many people who are taking out private loans who can't qualify for conforming financing, the answer is no, right? Everyone who's come to me saying, I need to use this lender to buy property from you, Elliot. I'm just so excited to buy from Ace. I go, did you just like my social media videos, or are you really ready to invest, right? Because if you can't qualify for the traditional loan, then you probably can't fucking float the property. And that's my opinion on these private loans. I'm very anti high risk debt. And look, even with my conventional loans, like you guys think I'm crazy here, but I coach my investors. The conversations I have with them on the phone are very different from like what I hear in the online investing community. Very different. Like, I wish you guys can hear me talk to real investors about real investment strategy. It's not sexy content, right? It's legit investing though. And what banks want to see is real investors should be severely underleveraged or a good distance away from the maximum LTV that a bank would allow you on a single property. A good distance away. And like, I've got enough liquidity to pay off my entire portfolio's debt balance in one swoop. And the bank still only offers me 65% LTV, and they only offer me that without asking any questions because I'm constantly buying properties without financing in cash and leaving them all cash. So they look at my portfolio and go, Elliot, as long as you stay under 50% LTV, we'll keep giving you loans at 65% LTV with our eyes closed. But a lot of you guys who are newer to the game or have been like on these like the forums and just the bullshit TikToks and all that, you've been listening to these guys going, hey, if they're giving me 65, I'm not going to take the loan. I'm going to go for a better loan. And the reality is 65 is probably where you should be playing long term, especially in an expensive real estate market. This is not a cheap real estate market, right? So yeah, my new investors, they'll get up to 80 with our banking relationship through US Bank, but that's up to 80 depending on the property's cash flow, which cash flow is not as high these days because one, interest rates are higher. Two, banks' appetites have tightened because they're a little more concerned about the economy, right? And the investor's position in the property. So they underwrite even more conservatively than they used to like a year ago. So they'll give you 70 to 80 on the first deal, but as soon as you get to like anywhere near $1 million in debt, they're hitting you at 50, 60, 65, and you should be happy with it. I know an investor, successful guy in Phoenix, and syndicator has like 300 or 400 units or something like that. I don't know how much of that is his share, but his total portfolio, including his investors, right? His total portfolio has debt of, I think he said like 50% LTV on it. And if you look at debt coverage, like if you calculate debt coverage, which is what the bank needs to measure if the property cash flows well enough to pay the mortgage with a margin of safety, on most properties that are in the real estate market today, outside of like Midwest and South, a 6 cap at a 5% interest rate doesn't hit the required debt coverage ratio that most banks need to see to give you an 80% LTV loan. That's probably like a 65% LTV loan. And if you're buying a 5 cap or a 4 cap and like, you're in Dallas or Phoenix buying 4 caps, right? Because that's the next market to buy in, or Florida or whatever it is. Guess what? A commercial lender, residential lender looks at your W-2, says, hey, you could afford this debt. As soon as you can't afford that debt anymore, as soon as you need to get a 5 unit or above, as soon as you've capped out on your residential loans, whatever happens first, you go commercial. Commercial looks at that 4 cap, and then they're giving you if you're lucky, a 5.5% interest rate. If you're not, a 6.5% interest rate. I'm getting like about 4.9 these days, but that's a deep relationship. But that lender at that 6% interest rate on a 4 cap property, they're making you put 55% down just to be able to cash flow that thing. And that's the side that you guys don't see, is debt has very clear limits. Very clear limits. And the more you have in total, sorry for the total dad lecture, guys, but the more total debt you have too, the more banks perceive you as a risk. Why? Because when you have one loan, they go, all right, he could float that, she could float that. But when you have millions of dollars of loans across multiple properties with multiple banks, they're competing for that collateral with everything. They're competing with literally you putting food on your table, with your mortgage, with you making your car payment, with that other bank that gave you that other loan. They're competing for collateral. So they need to see a lot more wiggle room in that collateral and a lot more under leverage to keep stacking onto your debt portfolio. And that's my TED Talk on how financing works, guys. I really, really want you guys to understand that stuff. Because look, a lot of these people that you see making videos saying, just get this loan, they don't really fucking know this business, right? And I've seen these loans go through underwriting, and I've seen these investors go through underwriting a million times. Every 8-figure investor and above I've ever met does not have 80% LTV across their portfolio. They don't have 70, and most of them don't have 65. I'm at 22 right now, and I own about 109 units as of today. I think we're closing on a few more pretty soon. And I'm at 22% LTV. I'd like to walk it gradually up to 50. I don't think it'll ever happen. I'll probably walk it to 35, call it good there. Because you know what? I like my cash flow, and I like when the bank looks at my financial statement and goes, you're a fucking home run, dude. So try to make that happen. And if you put as much effort into being a qualified borrower as you did into getting more debt, you'd probably be a much better investor. And we'll log off at that. All right, y'all, giveaway coming soon. Have a good weekend.